Let's talk about ISO 42001. I'll start with a real story. In 2023, engineers at Samsung were trying to work faster, so they did what many employees are doing today. They started using ChatGPT. They used it to debug code, summarize documents, and improve productivity in general. But here's what happened next. They unknowingly passed the confidential source code and internal data into ChatGPT. Now think about that for a second. That data was sent outside the company into an external AI system. And once that happened, they lost control over it. What was the end result? Well, Samsung had to ban the use of generative AI tools internally. Not because AI is bad, but because there was no controls. No policy, no guidance, no governance. Right now, companies are using AI to make decisions every single day. They're using it to hire people, to approve loans, and to respond to customers automatically. But here's the problem. In many cases, nobody actually understands how these decisions are being made. There is no clear visibility, no clear control, and sometimes no accountability. So when something goes wrong, when a decision is unfair, biased, or exposes sensitive data, the organization is left asking one simple question. How did this happen? So let's break it down simply. ISO 42001 is an international standard designed to help organizations manage AI systems responsibly. It provides a structured way to identify risks, control how AI is used, and ensure accountability across the organization. And very importantly, this is not just about tech companies. Any organizations using AI, even something as simple as ChatGPT or automation tools, is exposed to these risks. Now, here's the easiest way to understand this. If you already know ISO 27001, then you're already halfway there. ISO 27001 focuses on protecting information. ISO 42001, on the other hand, focuses on controlling AI. Same mindset, but you still have a risk-based approach, policy and procedures, defined controls, and continuous improvement. The only difference is the risk domain has changed. We're no longer just protecting data. We are now managing how machines think, decide, and behave. So this is where things get really important. AI introducing risks that traditionally IT systems simply don't have. So for example, AI can make decisions that you cannot explain. It can generate responses that sound correct, but are completely wrong. It can be biased depending on the data it was trained on. And one of the biggest risks, it can expose sensitive information just based on how users interact with it. Now think about that. In traditional systems, you control input and outputs. With AI, you're dealing with something that behaves less predictably. And that's exactly why traditional cybersecurity controls alone are not enough. At the core of ISO 42001 is something called AI management system, such as AIMS. This is the foundations of the entire standard. Think of it like this. If ISO 27001 has ISMS, an information security management system, then ISO 42001 has AIMS, an AI management system. It defines how AI is governed, what policies are in place, what controls must be followed, and how risks are continuously monitored. In simple terms, it's how organizations stay in control of AI. Another key concept in ISO 42001 is controlling the full AI lifecycle, and this is critical because risk doesn't just exist when AI is live. It exists from the very beginning, from how the AI is designed, to how it is developed, to how it is deployed, and how it is monitored and improved over time. ISO 42001 ensures that controls are applied at every stage, not just after something goes wrong, but before, during, and after deployment. So what does ISO 42001 actually focuses on? There are several key controls areas. First, AI risk management, such as understanding what could go wrong before it actually happens. Second, data governance, such as making sure that data used by AI is accurate, secure, and appropriate. Third, transparency and explainability, such as being able to understand and explain how AI makes decisions. Fourth, human oversight, such as ensuring that humans remain involved in critical decisions. And finally, accountability, making it very clear who's responsible for AI outcomes. These are not just technical controls, they are governance controls. Let's bring this into a real-world scenario. Imagine a company using AI to screen job candidates. On paper, this sounds very efficient, maybe faster hiring, less manual effort, but without proper controls, the AI could just be biased. It could reject candidates unfairly, and even worse, no one may be able to explain why. Now, imagine that becoming a legal issue or a public relation problem. ISO 42001 helps preventing this by ensuring risks are assessed upfront, decisions are monitored, and human remains involved in the process. So the potential business impact can be catastrophic. If AI is not controlled properly, organizations can face legal consequences, reputational damage, loss of customer trust, and in the future regulatory penalties. We already seen this happen in cybersecurity. Just remember when companies ignore cybersecurity, well, eventually they pay the price. So the same thing will now happen with AI. Now let's look at another real-world example. Because ISO 42001 is not just a framework that you read, you actually need to implement it. First, you define an AI usage policy. This clearly tells employees what they can and they cannot do with AI tools. So for example, are they allowed to paste customer data into ChatGPT, or are they allowed to use AI for decision making? These are all things that we need to consider. Second, we need to maintain an AI risk register. Just like in cybersecurity, we need to track what AI systems are being used, what risks they introduce, and how those risks are being managed. Third, we need to introduce an approval process. Not every AI tool should be used freely. High-risk use cases like hiring decisions or financial recommendations must go through formal approval. Fourth, monitoring and logging. We need visibility into how AI is being used. Otherwise, we're just openly blind. And finally, ownership. Every AI system must have a clearly assigned owner. So someone needs to be accountable for it. Because if something goes wrong, we need to be able to know exactly who's responsible. Now let's look at another example. So employees start using ChatGPT to speed up their work. So this happens in almost every organization nowadays. But again, without controls, employees may paste anything online, such as customer data, internal documents, sensitive business information, all into a public AI system. Now, think about that. Where is the data going? Who has access to it? And where is it being stored? In many cases, nobody knows. So how can ISO 42001 help? It can help by defining clear policies, preventing sensitive data exposure, approved tools instead of uncontrolled usage, monitoring of how AI is being used, and lastly, defined accountability. We must know who the owner is of specific platforms. This is how you reduce real-world risk. Now let's talk about the core critical policies of ISO 42001. So we briefly spoke about AI usage policy, which defines what employees are allowed to do with AI tools. Second would be the data policy specific to AI. This ensures sensitive data is never exposed to an external AI systems. Third, an AI risk management policy. This would define how AI risks are identified, assessed, and treated. Finally, an acceptable use standard. This provides clear rules employees must follow when using AI systems. Without these policies, there is no governance. Now let's talk about controls, because policies without controls don't mean anything. So ISO 42001 expects organizations to implement practical controls such as AI risk classification, because not all AI is equal. We must be able to classify AI systems as low, medium, or high risk based on impact. Second, human in the loop. AI should not be able to make critical decisions without human review. So some examples: hiring, financial approvals, or legal decisions. Third, data input restrictions. We must be able to control what data can be entered into AI systems. So sensitive data should never go into public AI tools. Fourth, output validation. AI output should not be trusted blindly. We must be able to review before action. And finally, vendor risk assessment. If you're using third-party AI tools, we must assess where data is stored, how it's processed, and what risks exist. And just like cybersecurity, we need an AI risk register. This is where we track all AI systems in use, the risks they introduce, the potential impact, and the controls we have in place. So for example, if 3 employees are using ChatGPT, one of the risks is obviously data leakage. So the control in this case might be blocking sensitive data input or restricting users to approved tools. Based on my own experience, I can definitely tell you that one of the biggest failures in organizations is lack of ownership. ISO 42001, for example, requires clear accountability. So every AI system must have an owner responsible for its use, someone accountable for risk and governance oversights, and of course, a security involvement. Because if something goes wrong and no one owns it, then no one is accountable. And this is where organizations fail. Here's my final thought. AI is extremely powerful, but without governance, it becomes a risk. ISO 42001 provides a structured way to stay in control and thus reduce risk. Organizations that start implementing this early will not only reduce risk, but will gain a competitive advantage.